Hello, my name is Dani Ondreka, fitness specialist, health coach, and exercise physiologist. We're here today to talk about exercise and mental wellness, specifically the role that movement plays on the mind and its mindset. So, we all know that exercise is good for us, right? We've heard it our entire lives, and there are lots of reasons that exercise can provide us benefits in our everyday life. Here are just a few. It's great for our heart health. We know that cardiovascular exercise is great to develop our heart muscle and can help us with our stamina. We also know it's good for bone health, specifically increasing our bone density, which can help us to stay strong, especially as we age. It also decreases all types of disease risk. Almost any disease that you could look up on the internet, you'll see that when you exercise, the risk for that disease or its symptoms is vastly decreased, which is fantastic. It also helps to improve overall memory and cognitive function. So when we think about exercise in relation to mood, it's great for two things. It's wonderful for mood enhancement or enhancing those positive feelings, things like joy, happiness, and it also helps to stabilize our overall mood. This could look like being fairly immediate. Research shows that 5 minutes after just moderate cardiovascular exercise, we're already starting to see some of those feel-good types of emotions. This comes from endorphins, which you may have heard of before. They're the feel-good neurotransmitters or chemicals in your brain that help to increase those feel-good emotions like joy or happiness. We also see this phenomenon happening over time, right? Through stabilization. We're being able to regulate our positive and our negative emotions over time. So instead of having super high highs and super low lows, we stay more in the middle, looking at that homeostasis, which is where our body prefers to be. So how can exercise help in some of these clinical realms? Maybe we're dealing with a diagnosis like depression. The great thing is that exercise actually does help to alleviate long-term depression and can do a lot as far as helping with some of the symptoms that come along with depression. Folks who have been diagnosed with diabetes are actually more likely to have depression and vice versa. Folks who have developed major depressive disorder are also more likely to develop diabetes. So we see this connection drawn here between these two things. So we know that exercise is beneficial for both of these diagnoses, right? It's great at helping with symptoms of depression. It's also great at helping and preventing diabetes. When it comes to anxiety, light aerobic exercise is a great place to start. We talk about moderate, for the most part, being a great place to begin, and we'll talk about the definitions of light and moderate and what that looks like in your everyday life. But specifically when it comes to anxiety, exercise can really mimic the symptoms of anxiety. So we're thinking higher heart rate, higher perspiration rate, maybe a higher rate of breathing. Those symptoms are anxiety symptoms, right? So when we start to exercise, we don't want to necessarily go really, really vigorous for long periods of time right off the bat because we don't want to mimic those symptoms that our body associates with being unsafe or having a negative mental state of mind. When we start out light, it's actually possible to reframe exercise as a safe environment to exist in by starting slow, doing exercises that maybe aren't super vigorous right off the bat, things that we could maybe talk during. And the brain is going to start to reassociate those symptoms, that higher respiration rate, that higher perspiration rate, with safety instead of danger. And then we can start to maybe increase some of those things we're doing in the exercise realm. So here's where many people go wrong when starting an exercise routine, and this goes for everyone. We love to start out going so hard, so fast with vigorous exercise that might be too intense for us. We don't want to be in extremes. Our body never wants to exist in a state where we're moving very, very intensely or not moving at all. We want to exist somewhere in the middle. So we can go for that homeostasis that our body likes to exist in all the time. So when we're moving in too intense of a way, this could look like it being very difficult to talk to a person next to you, maybe someone you're exercising with. If it's hard to sustain a conversation, we're having trouble getting words out, maybe that's a sign that our exercise is too intense from the jump. We can also postpone that post-exercise mood boost, the endorphins that we just talked about, by up to 30 minutes by exercising too intensely for too long. And we want to have that feel-good feedback, so we want to make sure we start off a little slowly. This can also be discouraging if our exercise is too difficult from the start. If things are really hard, that doesn't want to make us continue to do them. So starting out slow can lay a great foundation for us to succeed. So what is moderate exercise? We've talked about it. This is a great starting point. Research shows that moderate exercise is actually going to provide the most long-term benefit for our bodies as well as our mental state. It's exercise that's more sustainable, so we can continue it over a longer period of time. There's an easier recovery period. So we're not doing too much exercise, feeling incredibly sore for days, and having a hard time getting back into that routine. It can also have more of a calming effect overall on our brains, which is why when we discuss it here with our mental well-being, we see that it can have some great benefit. So what exactly is moderate exercise, right? If we want to do the math, moderate exercise is 50 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. Vigorous is going to look like 70 to 85% of your maximum heart rate. You notice we're getting nowhere near 100%. If we're ever getting near that range, that's a place we don't want to be in for a long period of time, as it's not very healthy for our heart muscle. If you don't know your maximum heart rate, that's okay. We can estimate it through this simple equation, 220 minus age. Just take your age in years, subtract that from 220, and that is your estimated maximum. Of course, there are lots of tests that you could do in a lab with heart rate monitors to further estimate maybe a little bit closer to your maximum heart rate, but this equation works well also. If you don't want to do that math, that's okay too. A lot of times when personal trainers or physical therapists are working with their clients, they might ask how hard their client feels they're working on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being the easiest, maybe very, very low effort, and then 10 being the hardest, the maximum amount of effort that they feel they're giving at that point in time. If we're using this RPE scale, we're thinking moderate is about a 5 or a 6 out of 10, and vigorous is about a 7 or an 8 out of 10 on that scale. So where do we start when it comes to exercise? We talked about not starting out too fast, right? Not doing things too vigorous, but it's also important to find an activity that we actually enjoy doing. We don't do things for long periods of time that we hate. So maybe for you, it's finding a dance class. Maybe it is finding an exercise class. Perhaps you want to start picking up walking and you have a friend in your neighborhood who wants to do the same thing. If it brings you joy and it helps you to feel good, we want to continue doing that thing. We also want to make sure we're making time for it. Some people are big schedulers and they want to actually kind of jot that down in their calendar and block off that specific time period. But we do know that when we make time for things, those things are important to us. So perhaps we need to think about our priorities, make a list of the things we need to prioritize in our day, and figure out where exercise fits in that list. We should also remember that all movement is additive. So maybe you don't have time for 30 minutes or 60 minutes during your day back to back for a workout. That's okay. Research shows that 5-minute bouts during the day that add up to 30 are going to be the exact same amount of benefit as 30 minutes altogether. So whatever amount of time works for you, as long as you can fit it in your day, it's all going to add up to the same amount of benefit. We should also think about increasing movement overall during our day. Maybe that looks like parking a little bit further away from the door at the grocery store. Perhaps we decide to take the stairs instead of the elevator, or we increase walking. Maybe we take a Zoom meeting, grab our headphones, we take a walk outside as we're listening to what our coworkers have to say. There are many ways to increase movement overall, but the more we're moving, the more we're increasing that mental health benefit. We can also think about involving a support person, maybe family or friends who we know can encourage us on our exercise journey. All right, so we've talked about movement. We've talked about how good it is for us. So let's do a little bit of movement together now. Now, because the majority of research has been done in cardiovascular exercise as it relates to mental health, we're going to do a little bit of that today. Please feel free to remain seated if that feels more comfortable for you, or you can stand and you can join me. So we're going to do a couple movements just to get the heart rate up a little bit. Maybe we start with a little step touch. Maybe you're one that likes to dance, right? So this is your preferred form of exercise. That's great. Maybe we want to add some arms into this movement. We could do a little throw, right? Maybe if dancing is our thing, we could reach across the body. Now we're getting a little bit of twisting in the spine. Fantastic, getting a little warmth back there in those muscles. Anytime we add this kind of reach overhead, we're considering changing levels, which is essentially what's happening. We're mimicking almost like going upstairs or standing up from a chair. When your heart actually changes position, right, from low to high, that is going to increase your heart rate. So we want to mimic that in some of the movements that we're doing here. So maybe we add some of our back muscles. We can step and pull. Maybe you've seen this in an old 80s aerobics video. Really effective for helping to wake up those back muscles. We're utilizing our hamstrings back here in the back of the leg as we increase that heart rate. Now, maybe we want to make this a little tougher. We can reach overhead, squeezing those elbows down towards our sides. Now we're using our lats. They are great core stabilizers. They help support your back and decrease back pain, which no one wants to have. And because we're reaching up and overhead, that's helping us to increase our heart rate just a little bit more. We could add a step up here. Maybe if you had a flight of stairs to actually go up, you'd really feel an increase in that heart rate. If you really wanted to make this a little bit more intense, you could also do high knees, right? Maybe adding a little jump in there, just depending on your level. Whatever challenges you is fantastic. We can also kick these heels up towards our glutes this way, continuing kind of that side to side motion. The goal is just to stay moving, right? I'm already feeling a little bit warmer. Maybe you are, I hope. So good. Now we can also utilize movements like a squat to help get that heart rate up. Thinking about a down and up motion. Consider there's a chair behind you. Maybe we're just gonna perch back in it, feeling a little stretch in the glutes and the hamstrings on the way down, and then coming up. We wanna increase that heart rate even further. We're gonna reach up at the top. If you were really extra advanced and you wanted to put a little extra on top here, maybe you could add a jump, but that's up to you. Even this small motion, right? This, what seems to be very low intensity, just a squat and a reach, is helping to change that heart rate. Fantastic. Of course, if you were someone who enjoyed walking outside with a friend, maybe you want to go to an actual exercise class, maybe you prefer to weightlift, there are also great cardiovascular benefits to those exercises as well. Jumping jacks are also phenomenal. We could do a little standing half jack if you want to take out that jump. You could also do this seated, right? Reaching an arm and a foot just out to the side from your seat. And we see again, reaching up overhead. That's helping that heart rate to come up. So we want to increase those endorphins today. Absolutely phenomenal. So those are just a few examples of exercises that you could do to increase your cardiovascular health. We want to think about doing these exercises during the week. A typical recommendation for cardiovascular exercise is 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week. We talked about how exercise is additive, so any movement that you can get throughout your day is going to be important. But I hope you feel a little bit better after you've gotten your joints and your muscles moving just a little bit. I would encourage you to find ways to move in your everyday life, not just for your physical health, but for your mental health as well. Thank you so much for joining me on this segment of Pathways to Mental Wellbeing. My name is Dani, and I hope you have a wonderful day.